Holy crap, you've come back? Geez, I guess I didn't scare you as much as I thought I did last time. Well, maybe these stories will do the trick, especially our last story. It deals with the most insidious, most terrifying, the most monstrous being to ever exist. I'm of course talking about Thomas the Train, but you'll have to stick around until the end for that one. Anyway, our first story just goes to show you that sometimes even skeptics have a story to tell. It's called Ghost of House 404.
I've always been a skeptic about ghosts, but my family has a chilling story that centers around me. Despite the events, I remain doubtful because I was only 6 years old at the time and remember very little. What follows is the story of House 404, as told by my family, and faint fragments of my memory. It started when my family moved into a new home after my mom and stepdad got together. During the showing, the realtor mentioned that the roses taped to the walls shouldn't be removed. Even as a kid, I found that odd. Naturally, my stepdad took them down right after we moved. Who would want roses taped to their walls? Strange things began happening soon after. One day, I came home alone after school, sat on the couch, and put on Snow Buddies, my favorite movie. Though I hadn't noticed anything unusual before, I suddenly felt uneasy, as if I wasn't alone. Then, I heard pacing upstairs, in my brother's room, the only room on the top floor. However, the moment my brother got home, the noises stopped. This wasn't an isolated incident. My aunt, who stayed in the basement with my uncle, often heard footsteps upstairs when no one was home. She too was a skeptic like me, but would often frantically call my mom to tell her about the walking she could hear when everyone was away. She and my uncle moved out quickly. Our dog, Bear, a large Australian Shepherd mix, started acting strange too. He refused to go upstairs, barked at the bottom of the stairs, and often growled while staring at my brother's bedroom door, where the pacing was heard, and would always sleep outside my door at night. One day, my brother's friend and his brother came over to play hide and seek in the basement. I hid behind the washer, while the other two chose spots under the futon and behind the TV speaker. My brother found his best friend pale and trembling under the futon. When we asked him what happened after the game was done, he claimed he'd seen footprints on the carpet and heard a woman whispering in his ear. When they found me, the boys spotted writing in what looked like red caulk or paint on the concrete wall near my hiding spot. It read something like, "These roses shall not be removed. They keep her spirit at bay. I say goodbye, for I'll unalive myself today." After that, my brother's friend swore he'd never come back to the house. At this point, 4 people now never wanted to come back: my aunt and uncle, and now my brother's friend and his brother. A few nights later, as I slept, my stepdad's cousin, sitting in the living room, which had a straight view into my room, noticed something moving in my room. It had a glass door because it was supposed to be an office. He alerted my parents, and they all watched as my blanket was lifted off my bed, not once, but 3 times, before it was yanked to the floor. Moments later, I was thrown from my bed across the room. I remember waking up crying, lying near my dresser, and my stepdad rushing in to comfort me, putting me back to bed. He claimed he didn't sleep for nights after witnessing that. He said he would sit on the couch just watching my room, just as the dog would do from outside my door. We moved out only about a week after. Years later, I researched the house's history, curious to see if any listings said anything about the encounters we had, and learned of an incident. A man had unalived his wife, days after their wedding, before unaliving himself in my brother's room. Her body was found in a sealed crawl space in the closet of my brother's room, where we would sometimes hear scratching. The roses taped to the walls. They were from their wedding, and seemed to hold her spirit at bay from what the man wrote on the wall. Removing them unleashed her. We say she targeted me because she'd been pregnant at the time of her passing and couldn't have the child she longed for. So she got mad that I was a child living in the house her child should have been living in. As someone who is a skeptic, I genuinely see how this story may sound fabricated. I personally believe I kicked my blanket off and rolled out of bed. The footsteps I heard could have been shifting foundation in the house. The dog growling may have been the dog knowing about an animal that was in the crawl space. That explains the scratching. The note could have been written by a delusional man that murdered his wife and believed she was haunting him. And the footprints and whisper could have been my brother's friend messing around. But I thought I'd share a story that my stepdad to this day hates bringing up. It's one of the few things that has actually scared him, and I think it's because this entity targeted me. To see what you all think. Is it a ghost or just some tricks of the mind? Sorry it isn't too long. I didn't want to bore anyone.
Wait a second. You were worried about boring anyone? You gotta be kidding. After hearing that story, I even peed myself a little. Which, as you can imagine, a ghost peeing themselves is not a pretty sight. Next, we have one from a young model that feels like she's being watched. We call this one, the face in the darkness.
Hi everyone, my name is Tainara, and I never thought I'd go through something like this, let alone have the courage to share it. But what happened a few weeks ago shook me to the core, and I need to get it off my chest. Maybe you can help me make sense of it. I'm a model, and I usually shoot my content at home, but this time I wanted something different. I rented a beautiful, modern apartment with huge windows and a stunning view of the city at night. I thought it would be the perfect backdrop for something sophisticated and unique. The night started off normal. I set up the lights, positioned the camera, and began recording. The apartment was very quiet, too quiet. Occasionally, I glanced out the window to admire the view, but every time I did, I felt this strange chill, as if someone were watching me. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just my imagination. But during one of the recordings, my camera stopped working out of nowhere. Weird, because the battery was fully charged and everything seemed fine. When I checked the footage, my heart sank. In the video, reflected in the window behind me, there was a face. It wasn't mine. It was pale, with sunken eyes and a smile. That wasn't human. It was wrong, disturbing. I froze. I replayed the video multiple times, trying to find an explanation. Maybe it was a reflection, a shadow, but it couldn't have been, because the face was too clear and seemed to be looking right at me. I deleted the video and tried to continue recording, even though my heart was racing. That's when the noises started. First, a faint crack coming from the kitchen. Then, light footsteps, as if someone were walking down the hallway. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The final straw was when I looked at the window's reflection again and saw something moving behind me. It was quick, but I know it was there. I didn't stick around to find out what it was. I grabbed my things and ran out, leaving some of my equipment behind. Since that night, I haven't been able to sleep properly. Every time I close my eyes, I see that face. And the worst part? Sometimes, even in my own apartment, I feel like I'm still being watched. Has anyone ever experienced anything like this? Could it just be my mind playing tricks on me? Or was there something more to it?
Holy crap! You know, it's bad enough when some creepy mortal is being a peeping Tom. But when that peeping Tom is a ghost, well, that's a new level of creepiness right there. Next up, we have one from an OP that involves her brother moving back in with them. The only thing is, he may not have come alone. It's called My Brother Brought Something Home from Prison.
My oldest brother moved out when I was a little child. I can't even remember him living in our house. I live with my dad and sister. Anyways, he got into trouble with the law because of a DD, and his wife kicked him out. My dad is a saint, so he let him move back in with us. Everything was fine at first. For the first few weeks, we would play card games and talk and watch TV. Then it came time for him to be sentenced to go to prison. He only ended up spending 2 months there, but when he came back, he had an entirely different demeanor and energy. The only way I could describe it is a negativity and darkness. At first, you could chalk it up to him having a negative experience, but he would reminisce seemingly fondly about his experience and claim that it was no big deal. My sister and I are very spiritually sensitive. It runs in the family on the female side. There were 3 distinct instances that solidified the idea that there was more going on than anything emotional or physical. The first instance, I was walking up the basement stairs when I heard footsteps at the top. I glanced up to see what looks like my brother crossing the threshold of the doorframe. I could even tell you he was wearing blue jeans, a red polo shirt, and yellow Timberland-style boots. I walk upstairs and look around the corner expecting to find my brother when my dad tells me he's actually 2 hours away in Buffalo. My dad and I were home alone, and he was wearing a blue shirt. The second instance, I had just fed the cats and decided to head upstairs to go to bed. I get halfway up the stairs before I hear a man's voice angrily yelling at me from the exact same place in the hallway where I saw the apparition. The third instance, my sister and I were pulling an all-nighter on the couch because I had a doctor's appointment in the morning. My sister says she has to pee, so she gets up and walks towards the hallway, then immediately proceeds to turn around and sit back down. She starts facing the wall and crying. I ask her what's wrong, and she's hesitant to tell me. After some coaxing, she tells me that she saw a huge shadow figure cross the hallway right at the top of the basement stairs. So that is 3 distinct manifestations, all in the same spot with 2 different witnesses. Since it scared my sister, I decided the next day to cleanse that area and also the space where my brother was staying. I cleansed the entire basement with sage smoke and blessed salt water. Never had anything happen again like that. He moved out shortly after. I put together a few years later that it was a fractured part of himself, like a PK manifestation. As far as I know, he's still walking around leaving pieces of himself wherever he goes.
Well, let that be a lesson to you kids. Keep your nose clean, because if you get sent to prison, then there is no telling what you may bring home with you. Well, I see by the clock it's getting pretty late, but I think we might have time for one more story. It's about a mother that buys a Thomas the Train clock for her son, but it looks like old Thomas already had a passenger. It's called The Haunted Thomas Clock.
Hi everyone. I thought I would share my very interesting story which happened to me at the start of this year, 2024. I had recently had a newborn son, and I also have another son who is 4 and likes to sneak into our bed at night. I always keep my bedroom door open slightly to listen out for him. One night I woke up and our son, who I first thought was standing at my bedroom door, I called out for him asking what he was doing and to come in, but he persisted on going into the hallway. I got out of bed and called out again, checked the hall, nothing. I was very confused. I checked his bedroom, and he was sound asleep. In the morning I told my husband what had happened, but he reassured me I was probably half asleep, which I agreed. Until the second time the exact same scenario, but this time around I could see it wasn't my son, but a young boy around the same age height. He was glowy white and more defined than a mist or haze. I couldn't quite make out features on face or anything. Just standing curiously, almost like he was scared to enter the room. I made sure I sat up and blinked several times. I was definitely seeing this. Again next morning I told my husband, but I could tell he was a bit intrigued this time. I swore I seen what I saw, yet still ever so slightly in doubt, thinking am I going daft? Perhaps. There was a pattern to the times though. I would press my phone on my bedside cabinet. Both times was between 2 to 3 a.m. Third encounter was the cherry on the cake for me. My husband was working in London at the time, so me and both kids were in my room asleep. Same thing, I woke up roughly 2:25 a.m. Same little boy just watching me sleep at the door. This time I freaked out. It wasn't my imagination, I was 110% seeing this. I jumped out of bed and slammed my door in fear. The next day I racked my brain for ages. I live in a newish built estate. I've never ever had anything like this. I feel so safe in my home, so why now? All of a sudden why do I have a ghost in my home? Until the penny dropped. I realized this had been brought into my home. We recently decorated my son's bedroom. Thomas the Tank Engine, he is obsessed. I found a gorgeous rare vintage solid ceramic Thomas clock which I fell in love with the minute I seen it on Vint. It was from the 1980s and it cost me £25, and it was well worth it. Ever since it arrived it sat on my son's window ledge. We all admired it. I took a chance and thought I'll find the lady I purchased this from and send a message to dig deeper into the clock's past without sounding too crackers. I sent a message asking if it belonged to any children in the past. The kind lady responded telling me her son owned it for 10 years and they bought it from a charity shop before that. I took my opportunity to tell her about my nighttime encounter. I thought, hell, she doesn't know me, who cares if she thinks I'm nuts? I'll take the opportunity to ask if she ever had anything like that. She responded that she hadn't and apologized. I left it at that. Hours later she sent me another message late at night to tell me she had been telling her husband about me messaging and he reminded her of her little boy used to wake up at night and see a little boy playing in his bedroom. I instantly thought, wow. I wonder if this is connected. I needed help, advice, anything. I have followed a spiritualist on Instagram for a very long time. I always saw amazing reviews posted about her. I took another chance privately messaging her asking for help on a situation that I've never dealt with before. She replied fairly quick asking me if this is in relation to a miscarriage. I thought. Strange reply, but no. I explained the ghost, clock, vint seller scenario. To which she replied, message the vint seller and ask her if she has had a miscarriage on a boy named Thomas. Again, I thought, very strange reply. It's clearly a Thomas clock, so that threw me off. I was sure I wasn't getting anywhere with this, but thought, what do I have to lose? I messaged the vint lady and explained I was in touch with a spiritualist about the situation and she was asking about a miscarried boy named Thomas. Well, the reply I got from her swept me off my feet literally. She had miscarried a boy a few years ago and they didn't have a name for him, but their second name was Thomas. He was known as Baby Thomas. Both her and I were in shock literally. I made sure I sent screenshots of the conversation between me and the spiritualist. The spiritualist then explained to me that I had to use the name Thomas to communicate next time I see him. His spirit is attached to the clock, and he is lost and won't know where he is. She also explained he's attracted to the motherly energy in the home with a newborn, hence why it was me seeing him and I had to put a form of protection around my house and everyone in it. She explained how to do this to me. Long story cut short, I never did see Thomas again, but other crazy things started happening like lights not working or flickering. I decided Thomas had to go, enough was enough. My husband was secretly freaked out also, who is normally very skeptical. I asked vint lady if she would like the clock back, free of charge. I'd cover Pan P. I thought she would have an emotional attachment to it, which she did. She was very happy to get it back. We exchanged numbers and sent a few nice messages back and forth. I cleansed my house about 10 times and taught myself a lesson about buying second-hand rate vintage items. Supposedly you've to cleanse them right away. This also made me a very spiritual person and changed my perspective on a lot of things. My eyes have been opened to little signs and comforts. I've even got my husband aware when they happen. Ghosts are real and I hope to never see one again. Thanks guys, enjoy the read.
Well guys, do you want to know something? Thomas the Train is pretty terrifying to begin with. Oh hell, he even terrifies me. I mean, think about it. He's a train with a human face, talks, and travels throughout the countryside, all without a driver. They should have just named his TV show, This Train Possessed. Well, it looks like we survived our Thomas the Train terror. I know his image will linger for some time, but I know something that you can do that might help to push thoughts of old Thomas out of your head. All you have to do is hit like, subscribe, and share this video. It'll really help us keep the ghosts at bay. And of course, if any of you have a story to share, have any thoughts about our stories tonight, have any suggestions on subjects for upcoming videos, or even just general thoughts about my channel, then by all means, drop me a line in the comments. But I do want to thank you for stopping by, and I hope the stories we told won't be giving you too many bad dreams. But if they do, then maybe you shouldn't run from them. After all, sometimes it's better to embrace your nightmares.